In the 1760s, Britain was in massive debt following the 7 Years' War, and in order to raise funds to pay off the debts, Britain would place a series of taxes on the American colonists. The first set of taxes were established through the Stamp Act of 1765. Virtually every single piece of printed paper was taxed, from playing cards, to business licences, to newspapers and legal documents. Then the Townshend Act of 1767 taxed essentials like paint, glass, lead, and most importantly for this story, tea. It's well known that Brits love their tea, however Americans equally shared a love for the hot beverage, drinking nearly 1.2 million pounds of the stuff per year. The British government felt the taxes were fair, as much of its debt was earned fighting wars on the colonists' behalf. However, the colonists disagreed, and they were furious at being taxed without having any representation in Parliament. They felt it was wrong for Britain to impose taxes on them to gain revenue. On the 5th of March 1770, angered at the British presence guarding the Boston Customs House, American colonists would throw snowballs, ice and oyster shells at the Brits, with British reinforcements firing on the American mob, killing 5 and wounding 6. This would only increase hatred for the British, with the conflict being dubbed the Boston Massacre. During this time, American merchants found a workaround to the unjust taxations on tea by importing tea from elsewhere, particularly from Holland, as there was no tax. This would leave the East India Company with millions of pounds of surplus tea and on the brink of bankruptcy. In May 1773, the British Parliament would pass the Tea Act, allowing the East India Company to sell tea to the colonies duty-free and much cheaper than other companies, with tea still being taxed at the colonial ports. This only increased the amount of smuggled tea, with the cost of smuggled tea overtaking that of the East India Companies. However, prominent tea smugglers like John Hancock and Samuel Adams managed to keep the public in a boycott of British tea through protests. At this point it's important to mention the Sons of Liberty, which both Adams and Hancock were a part of. This is a group of colonial merchants and tradesmen formed to protest taxation. Now we move to the 16th of December 1773, where 3 British ships carrying tea docked at Griffin's Rath. At the same time, around 5,000 colonists gathered at the Old South Meeting House. The colonists voted to refuse paying taxes on tea, or even allow the tea to be unloaded, stored or sold. A captain of one of the ships told the crowd of colonists that he couldn't leave until his cargo was delivered. That same night, over 100 colonists, including some Sons of Liberty members, dressed as Native Americans, boarded the docked ships and threw 342 chests of tea overboard. It reportedly took almost 3 hours for the men to empty the tea into the Boston harbour, completely destroying 45 tons of tea, which in today's market would cost around $1 million. This event would be named the Boston Tea Party, and as far as protests go, this was certainly one of the tamer ones, as despite the destroyed tea, no other property was damaged and no casualties were inflicted, and the participants of the Tea Party are reported to have even swept the decks clean before they left. The British Parliament were infuriated, passing the Coercive Acts as punishment to try and restore order in Massachusetts. All this would achieve, however, is increasing disdain for the British Crown and would lead to the nations closing in on an impending war. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe and comment what topics you'd like to see in an upcoming video.